Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu has met with his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping in Beijing, China. Both leaders have announced the elevation of Nigeria-China ties to a more comprehensive strategic partnership. They agreed to build a high-level Nigeria-China community with a shared future. Tinubu also spoke on his administration's economic reforms, assuring Jinping of Nigeria's commitment to sustainable growth through the effective implementation of ongoing economic reforms. President Xi noted the strong mutual understanding between Nigeria and China since the establishment of diplomatic ties over the past 50 years.
We need to anchor this. I agree with you that China-Nigerian relations that is over half a century should further strengthen our trade and economic development program. Nigeria has a very great potential as largest population in Africa and is the biggest economy. A very young population to drive the economic development and programs.
And in addition to statements of joint mutual interest and commitments to development, security, and undertaking to work together for the betterment of Nigeria, Africa, and to partake in global development, specific agreements were signed, memorandum of understanding. 5 are all development related. 4 of them were were signed on behalf of the Chinese government by the National Reform and Development, the National Development and Reform Commission of China, and I also signed on behalf of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Equally, there's one agreement with the China International Development Agency, as well as Nigeria. Again, I signed on behalf of Nigeria. These 5 agreements are all developmental in nature.
Well, let's bring in Charles Onunaiju, who is a member of the International Governing Council of the China African Institute. Good to see you and thanks for your time. African leaders are again all in China, even though this started about 24 years ago. How equal is this partnership between African countries, in this case Nigeria and China?
Well, from the point of the natural system of international relation, all states are equal. All states have equal weight within the framework of international law. But of course, you have variations in terms of capacity, in terms of national aggregate, in terms of power structure. But I think the China-African cooperation has been largely driven by understanding that all states are equal. Like you know, the Chinese pay as much attention to Nigeria as they pay to Togo, to Benin Republic, to Seychelles, to Malawi, because in their understanding, every sovereign state has equality before in the context of international law. And essentially, for the Chinese, sovereignty means you have capacity to engage with other states in the international system. FOCAC in the first place, for information, was suggested by Africans. It was African leaders that suggested that you have JICA, you have TICAD, Tokyo International Corporation, comprising Japan and African countries. And in 2000, African states suggested that China and Africa should have a framework of cooperation, a more stable framework of cooperation. And FOCAC was founded in 2000. To hold meetings every 3 years. And since then, the distinct feature of FOCAC is it doesn't have permanent secretariat, it doesn't have bureaucracy, an army of bureaucrats but it is a process, a mechanism that engages the two sides. And within the 3-year space of each meeting, there is no complacency. You have complete follow-up mechanism. Every decision taken in the preceding meeting are expected to be completely fulfilled.
Right.
And this has been the hallmark. It's been practical since 2000. All the decisions taken in respect of China-African cooperation have been religiously. I give you one example. In 2015, the very iconic meeting in Johannesburg, the second summit of heads of state and government, the Chinese offered 10 programs including infrastructure construction, industrialization, connectivity. And frankly speaking, since that time, there have been tremendous changes.
So this has been a beneficial relationship.
Absolutely.
On both sides.
Absolutely.
It's not. Nigeria is ready to do business with you. That's Tinubu to the Chinese. And of course, he's assured of providing the right environment for the Chinese to do their business. He's also reassured that they can take their funds out when it's needed. What you're hearing and what you're seeing so far from this visit, from this interaction between Nigeria's President Tinubu and the Chinese leader, have you been hearing what meets your expectations?
It's interesting. There's been like 5 agreements has recently been signed. But I tell you frankly, the problem with Nigeria is not so much of agreements, of signing memorandum of understanding. I know in 2012 there was a memorandum of understanding with a Chinese company, CNOCC, to build 4 green refineries. And thereafter, nothing happened. On the Chinese side, they worried there were a lot of variations long after the agreement was made.
Right.
And the backed-up, that's China National Oil Company. 2 years later, they went to Niger Republic, when Niger Republic found oil in Agadez region. And within 3 years, they built the Soral refinery, which is producing more than 300,000 barrels of crude oil. Sometimes we even import. And it's a state thing, because here we say, oh, only the private sector can. The Niger state government has 51 stake, and CNOCC, Chinese company, has 49 stake. And not only does Niger produce enough for their domestic use, but they even export to countries like Nigeria. Having found oil only in 2001, built a refinery within 3 years, and have a joint venture with a Chinese company that is very, very ongoing and stable and profitable to both sides.
So how do we ensure that this MOUs, just like you said, I mean, translate to concrete results, for Nigeria?
Well, President Tinubu told President Xi Jinping that he is a reformer, and his antecedent can be a witness to him. To be fair to him, while he was governor of Lagos State, he had an engagement with China and then built the Lekki industrial hub, which remains Nigeria's most successful and most iconic industrial hub.
Let me come in here, because the conversation has been going across the continent, and many across the continent still think that this is an unequal partnership, knowing full well that the continent, Nigeria inclusive, has a lot of mineral resources across the continent. We have cobalt, we have lithium, and so many others. Have you seen the harnessing of these energy mineral components that has helped drive the African continent?
Okay, on this inquiry, let me tell you something. By 1979, almost all African countries, including Nigeria, were richer than China. They have larger GDP than China. China resumed reform. Before 1979, before the reform, what an average Chinese wants is 3 things: radio, bicycle, and sewing machine. Today, Beijing contains the largest concentration of billionaires in the world. In the Fortune list of 500 companies, you have more than 200 Chinese companies. China posts the largest number of patents, scientific discovery, every year. So the question is, what happened? I am happy President Tinubu said he's a reformer. Yeah. But reform is not political bravado. Chinese reform has been persistent since 1978 because it's institutional, based on the reality of China.
Regardless of who the leader is.
It's institutional.
Right.
It's not a political bravado. It's not economic adventure. It is contextualized within their specific historical and national reality, not handed over by anyone, but by the reality of China. And that's why the reform has been stable, steady, and have produced the most successful economic result in the world. China has produced...
well, we're out of time.
So what I'm trying to say...
Because he still hasn't answered my question, how that has actually been
No, because you were speaking about inequality, because I want to tell you that nations...
on the grounds of the resources here on the continent, Nigeria inclusive, which China has actually has its hands on.
And in any case, it is strictly reductionist to describe China-African relation as recently transactional. If you remember, I just want to tell you that in the 70s, when China was poorer than most African countries, it helped build one of the African longest railway, the Tazara Railway. When China was not in a capacity to extract the resources.
Fokak is still very much there. We hope to bring you back. Apologies.
Nigeria has to learn
from
the Chinese models.